Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, once again, time for Morning Talk. I'm your host, Jay Sam. I do that every single. I do the watch. What happens is what happened was there's a start sequence, and I still haven't got that start sequence down. And the start sequence is I go to camera one. Mm-hmm. For a whole set of reasons. Camera one is camera two. Over here.
Oh, okay.
Over here, camera one is camera one.
Okay.
All right. I'll walk you through the techno babble after.
Okay.
But camera one has been assigned to button 2 over here and button 2 to camera 1. Because the video signal, for whatever reason, when passing through some of the monitors, doesn't come out. I can't change that in the software, but I can change it on the hardware. Okay. And that's the genesis of the problem. And force of habit, because this is camera 1, I go to 1. Okay. Once I do it, I'm good for the rest of the program.
Yeah. Well, you look great on the monitor here.
Right, but I'm not I'm supposed to come up first just to say that, and then I switch to Mr. Russell.
Yes.
And but
I want you to know that the explanation you just gave
is more complicated, more confusing than not knowing.
It's okay.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Right, and this is what we call stretching. You know, in television, there's a term like that.
Yes.
Stretch.
Yes.
That means there's a technical reason in the technical Russell. They want you to keep talking.
Yes.
And we keep talking so we can set up Russell's shot.
There you go.
There we go.
And he's matching the Access TV logos today. Oh. Look at you. Yeah, you're in royal blue here.
Yeah, blue is a beautiful color for television.
Sure is.
Blue. Look, see, that I did set him up, but the camera's floating on its own. I don't know what's going on here.
Maybe it's something spiritual.
Could be.
It's trying to make room for Russell's glory.
Hey, you need a bigger place. Matter of fact, you need a larger city.
A stadium.
You need a larger city.
Oh, I was definitely thinking a studio.
I like that.
You need a larger city, man. I like that. It can't contain it.
Amen.
There's no way.
Amen. See, part of the problem is a lot of people don't feel good about themselves, and if you don't know who you are, you can't contend. You can't contend.
That's right.
You know.
Amen.
There's a lot of people. Those are self-esteem issues.
Yeah.
Self-esteem, right? Yeah. For a lot of people, and you know, there's the saying that if you don't think you can win, you won't.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, you know, if you're on a sports team and you think you guys are horrible and we're not going to win.
But let me be clear. It's not my glory.
I was feeding you the line, Russell.
It's his glory. But now, you know, but let me just say this too. You know, I think it's important too, because some folk mistake you know, your glory for arrogance. And the reality of it is that I have a confidence.
Right.
Because I do know who I am, and I know whose I am. And so, you know, I rest in his glory.
All we need is the organ to play.
Amen.
Stan.
Amen. 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 Well, it might not even be good. I can.
No need for an organ, just a straight word. Straight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Straight, no chaser.
Okay.
Songwriter said, we're often tossed and driven on restless seas of time. Somber skies and howling tempests often succeed the bright sunshine. But in that land of perfect day, when the mist have rolled away, you'll understand it better by and by.
You know that if you look up words or hear television and you hear Americans talk or English, it's the Noah Webster English, and it comes from New England. So the general dialect you hear on television is New England.
New England.
That's the American standard. And I would contend, if you're not from Memphis, you're not going to ever be a good preacher. Because a good preacher dialect, you have to be from Memphis because it's the way you say certain words. And otherwise you'll sound like a New England preacher. But there's a cadence in there,
Yes, there is.
delivery that only comes from a good Mississippi, Alabama.
Yeah, the South.
The Southern black
You own
Yes.
dialect.
Yes.
You own to something.
Yeah, there
I'm
is something.
serious.
You absolutely own something.
Yeah.
Particularly within the black church.
Well,
Yes.
in the Baptist church, I think, in the Black Baptist church anyway, but I think, there needs, and there has been an upgrade too, because I think folks are sometimes lost in the cadence and they're not listening to the substance. And so what has to happen is people have to, leave with something that they can, in fact, internalize. The word stand. The word of God is seed. It's seed. So that seed has to go into a ground.
Be fertilized,
That's
watered.
Right. That's right. And that ground is you. That ground.
Fertile soil.
There you go. If it goes into fertile soil, Jesus was unbelievably, I know to some, and remarkably, majestic, and
Majestic but humble.
oh, well, certainly,
Yeah.
That's a characteristic, but
then
how
was
you
he,
do
was
how
he
you-
as humble as we like to make him out?
There you go.
It was exceedingly.
There was a militancy to him also.
I don't think he was militant. I don't think he was radical. By our standard, he was militant and radical.
Yes, by our standards.
He
Yes.
was himself.
Yes.
That's right.
Others found what he said to be contentious because the truth often is. Therefore, he was deemed radical. Because it's sort of like, you can definitely relate to the next statement here. You're just angry and mad.
Really?
Well, I'm not angry or mad. I didn't like something that was said. And now, but the fact that you disagree automatically makes you
Oh, of course.
an angry black man or angry black woman.
And
Well-
and the mischaracterization happens, unfortunately, too frequently. That's why I'm very conscious of words. See, the language that we use, is so very, very important. How would you define humble? See, I define humble as power under control. Other folks look at humble and think, well, he's this lowly person who,
Or weak.
he just, is passive, that sort of thing. When clearly he was none of that. He was majestic. He understood he was the King of Kings.
He understood his power.
So yeah, power under control.
Right.
He even said on a number of occasions he didn't have to give his life if he didn't want to. He could have commanded legions of angels, but he was following orders from the Father.
Well, amen. Morning talk and more.
Amen.
Amen. Miss Vicky, how was your yesterday?
Oh, wow. After all of that, huh? I had a system collapse. I went home.
Doing too much. Went home and
I
crashed.
just, I was, I cooked this wonderful dinner. Had every intention of eating it, and I just couldn't do it. The tiredness came over me.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. Well, everybody
Queen
else.
V, come on.
Everybody else enjoyed it, but I just, I crashed.
Oh,
I
Queen
know.
V, you got the system on overload.
Oh, and it
dog.
was on overload yesterday,
Oh,
and I
that
just.
ain't right. That ain't
Yeah, and
right.
I just said
Yeah.
I can't.
Exhausted.
Yeah, I just couldn't do it, and I said what I said was I'm going to lie down for a few minutes, and when I woke up, it was 4:30 this morning.
Wow.
I said, "Woo!" Okay, I said the body needed rest, so I said.
From 4:30 and what
Well,
time was it?
actually it was the evening, so it was like maybe 10:30, 11.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that was
it was
it.
time to crash.
Yeah.
That was time to crash. Yeah.
That's it. It's,
Yeah,
but I
that
feel
is.
better today. So, but when your body needs rest, you have to just go with it. Sometimes I often say that the hunger will the tiredness of the body will overtake the hunger. So you won't even need, it didn't even occur to me that I didn't eat. Yeah.
Sleep, when sleep comes.
Yeah.
I call it a trip. We're gonna get ready. I'm leaving at 1:00 a.m. I'll be back sometime in the morning. I don't know where I'm going. So you go to the land of Nod.
Yeah.
But sleep, you're going to go to sleep.
Yeah.
You might be on the highway, but when sleep comes, if you don't
I hope you're not on the highway.
sleep.
I pray you're not on
A
the
lot
highway.
of people, if you don't respect sleep,
That's right.
sleep's coming. You will, just like children.
Yeah.
You'll lay down on the floor and go. Your body can't function no more. Just
That's right.
You're out. You're done.
That's it. So
Sleep.
sleep is very important.
I'm just kind of curious now. You said around 10 or 11. That's when I usually go to bed anyway.
Oh my! I couldn't even think to go to bed at 10.
No, I can go a lot later.
Really?
Yeah. I'm a night owl.
Really?
Remember, I told you my dad worked rotating shifts. So when you got
Yeah.
somebody that works in the house rotating shifts at times,
And so what time do you normally get up?
in the morning,
Yeah.
I'm up about 6.
6. I get up every morning. I wake up automatically about 5, between 4:30 and 5.
Yeah,
I've
that's around.
shifted my time to go to sleep. So now I'm asleep by 1.
Mm-hmm.
It used to
that's
be
about right.
4.
So you're functioning on 3 hours of sleep a day, 3 or 4 hours. of
My
sleep a day.
optimum sleep schedule is 1 to 4:30. Optimal.
You take naps in
Then
the day.
Yeah.
Noon to 2.
Yeah, you
Siesta
take naps.
time.
And then about
I'm glad you're telling me
7
this,
to 9.
so I'll know when not to bother you, because I just can't imagine,
Don't people used to bother me, but now I don't answer the phone.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
The secret is not that people bother you. The thing is that you allow folk to.
Right.
You give people the space.
Right.
So it's not really their fault. You answered the phone.
Yeah, that's it. You answered the phone.
Right. Don't you know I'm busy? Well, you answered the phone. I mean, you didn't have to answer the phone. Right? Well, we do have a guest this morning. We're joined by a poet, a writer, a producer of music, a producer of television, done an internship at the White House.
Wow.
Very talented young person.
Versatile.
Yeah.
Very versatile. Yeah. He's
And I mean, he's not
remarkable,
Like,
actually.
he's not like young, but he's young.
He's
You
a
get
young-
to a
he's a
certain
young man.
age and you
Yeah,
call
he's-
people young.
Right.
I think once you get 60, anyone that's younger than you is young.
Yeah. Well,
But
everybody's
nonetheless,
younger than me.
He's not a stranger, so we'll welcome him aboard. Darrell, how are you, brother?
Hi, Mr. McCauley. I just want to thank you for allowing me to be on your talk show, and I want to thank you and your wonderful guest. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, it's good to have you on board. Now, you're cutting in and out for some reason, so
You can't hear me? No.
I can
Audio's
hear
not
you.
good?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. That's better. Whatever you're doing now made it better. So, but welcome aboard. Thanks for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedule. I want to show you all. So I'm going to jump right into this thing I got here off of Facebook, if you don't mind, Darrell. And I want to talk a little bit about this. We're going to throw this up here real quick. I refuse to make money or bolster my career from the death of any melanated person.
Wow. Wow.
Darrell
Right.
Fitzgerald. This is June 11th.
Yes.
And obviously, there's a whole lot of people profiting, doing a whole lot of stuff off of, first and foremost, the number one person would be George Floyd right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
May his soul
And,
rest in peace.
That's really where that post came from. Was me looking at a lot of the response to the unfortunate atrocity that took place with Mr. George Floyd and his death, and it just really kind of struck me to heart with the value of life and what does people's lives represent, especially melanated people, people of color. It almost seems like there seems to be more value in the lives of melanated people in death and not during their actual lives.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to his family, I would feel, me personally, I would feel very uncomfortable. Maybe it's a moral issue for me, a humane issue for me, but to just use Mr. George Floyd's death as just a platform to bolster a career or to make money, it doesn't seem as if I would be giving his life homage and respect. You have so many people making lots of money from this man's death. It speaks to a larger issue, especially dealing with melanated people, is that, like I said, it seems as if people see that they have more value when they're dead than valuing them when they are alive.
Your remarks remind me of James Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
Baldwin, in a lot of his writings, if you will, I think made the distinction between those who were valued, if you will, in their current state versus those who are valued, once they've sort of lived past a certain point in their life, prime or whatever you want to call it. And so I think it's a keen observation on your part, and it kind of speaks to your insight about the human condition, really, and the way that people react to the things around them.
Yeah.
And also
No.
personal, beyond personal profit, there's agendas.
Right.
Yes.
There's clearly a political agenda.
Oh, of course.
There's a whole worldwide movement where at the center of that movement is quote unquote racism, white supremacy. It's a hodgepodge of things, because in societies where the predominant, prevailing hue of people would be considered white, there's an uproar within that racial cohort of people fighting supremacy. I guess if one looks at racism or white quote unquote supremacy, you can look at it as a type of power. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the abuse of power mm-hmm. probably manifests through the police. But ultimately, this is not caused by George Floyd, and it predated him, mm-hmm. but he is the catalyst for the current movement. And the problem with movements is, of course, is that they come and then they go. Is it exploitation to use someone's death as the springboard for a movement or a political wave? Is that in the same league as profiting from somebody's death?
Aren't they really kind of like bookmarks in time? I think that they, sort of, depict a certain circumstance or certain condition in time that we are made acutely aware of, if you will. And I think that this has been building for a while, mm-hmm. and I think that's kind of the Baldwin's point that I was saying. That's why when I listened to what Darrell just said, not taking this moment in time to try to capitalize off of it is very poignant, because so many people are in a rush to grab the narrative.
Mm.
Yeah.
And they're grabbing the narrative so they can somehow affix themselves to it, and so they can sort of be remembered, if you will, or recognized at a certain point in time that acknowledges, if you will, their perceived value, if you will. And I think it's a perception,
Now I don't see anything wrong with capitalizing the moment and seizing it and using it for necessary positive change.
Right.
Right.
And that's a good thing. I mean, that's one of the greatest things that's going to come out of the protests and things of that sort. I mean,
right.
There's going to be hopefully a legislative change. I mean, we see one of the police officers actually dealing with, I believe it was first to third degree charge, and it was boosted to a first degree charge. So it appears that there will be a restructure in the policing system, and it seems as if there will be more accountability on the regards of the actions of police officers when they're dealing with people at the point of arrest. And if that comes out of it, then this man's death, Mr. George Floyd's death, is not in vain. If the people who use that, it could be used for positive.
But most movements, there's a sacrifice, if you will. And, there are some who say that, George is part of the martyrdom, if you will, that happens, that helps to produce a movement, if you will. But, I think in the grander scheme of things, the strategy has always been there, because it obviously it's not new. Back in the 60s, you had people who were suffering, through these atrocities too. And then there was, suddenly they reached a point. I call it they developed an awareness, because they knew too that the things that were happening were much more pervasive than people were letting on. It's kind of like, the narrative was to keep that information from the masses. It was to isolate it. And that, to a great degree, I think they're doing it even now. They're isolating it. And they don't want you to know that this happens over and over and over again for no real apparent reason. And the system itself, sort of stands by and supports it, because the system, I believe, is threatened by melanated people, if you want to put it, because the oppression cannot last forever.
It's like a dam that's breaking.
Yes.
At some point,
yes.
that dam breaks.
It's going to break.
It's going to break. It's going to consume whoever is standing there.
That's right.
That the force is that powerful.
Very, very good metaphor.
People aren't going to stand for this anymore.
No. It's everywhere.
Well, people.
And what's interesting, I think, is happening out of this movement that we have started. Others are finding their voice. Now, I was noticing that Native Americans now
Amen.
are pulling down these statues and carrying on, and I was like, wow.
Well, I mean, it
has really.
It's an awareness.
It's an awareness, and it's made people who have been quiet, and of course, Native Americans have been very quiet.
That's
I mean,
right.
and they're saying, "Wait a minute now."
Yeah.
And they certainly have had their issues on their reservations.
Mm-hmm. Well, their issues on their one that, but
but let me finish. I just say that they have their own issues that are different, maybe from ours, but they're issues, and they are saying now, "Wait a minute, we matter too here."
Absolutely.
Well, I would contend that their issues are far grander than our issues, not different, grander.
Yeah, they got the country taken away from
right.
them.
So they on a reservation, the whole country.
Yeah.
Technically,
they sorry now they help those
should be there. So I mean, if the indigenous people, because they like to call it a native.
How do they want to be called? What do they want to be called? I thought it was Native Americans. Do they want to be called something
Americans, Indians. In America, it's a black-white issue. In South Africa, it's a black is tantamount to Indian.
Yeah.
It's not the blacks and the coloreds anymore?
It's blacks, coloreds, whites. But blacks,
coloreds, and
blacks
whites?
and coloreds are different because
Yes,
blacks are synonymous with Native American.
Okay.
Blacks are indigenous.
Yes.
So it's an indigenous people's issue. You never hear it phrased that way in America, because if you talk about indigenous, it's like, well, I'm squatting in your house. And so
it's
technically,
true.
Yeah, well,
it's true.
It's true when you think about
it. There's a whole, if things were done right, if there was recompense, maybe black people would get 40 acres and a mule, and then they would get their country back, and everybody would have to leave. Because the house I'm in right now is on native indigenous land. Yeah. Connecticut was just taken.
That's it.
The Pequot Indians. I mean, the Connecticut River. All of this area belonged to someone before somebody came here.
You see it in the names of the towns.
So when you recompense people what they're due, oftentimes people want to protect their own gains. Mm-hmm. And so, like Russell is saying, I believe that the system is set up so as to create a utopian society for certain individuals, and the utopian society is going to be protected as long as it can. And, 60 years ago, folk were finding voice, and here we are, back exactly where we started from. It's sort of like the children of Israel walking in a circle for 40 years,
Right.
and they are no further ahead than they started off.
The actual deliberate perpetuation of the oppression of a people is actually, I think, magnified at this moment. I think that what people are, and most people are being made acutely aware of, is that it's not just people of color. Yes, it's more so people of color than people who are not of color, if you will. But the reality of it is that when you talk about the skin color, that's that social construct, and it's really ancillary. But what they really are referring to are people who are the ones who have and the ones who don't.
Systemic,
You know what?
systemic oppression.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stan, you raised a good point, and you said something about like if melanated people of African descent got 40 acres in a mule. And my question is, if we did get 40 acres in a mule, how would that interplay in terms of our interconnectivity and our own self-governance? Because this whole George Floyd thing is really making me think, and I think like this often, about the value of life. And in the Black community, amongst melanated people, how do we show each other that we value our lives, our living lives, through our social relations? I look at two sectors: relationships and economy. And if I look at how, for the big picture of how melanated people in the United States of America relate as it relates to the value in relationships and economy, it tells a story that we have a way to go as a people. We have a big stretch way to go as a people, because there's so many breakdowns, and I'm not trying to just be talk gloom, but if we really take a close look of what we are doing in those two sectors, how we coexist through relationships and economy,
Yeah.
that will tell us how much we really do value
Yeah.
our livelihoods.
You know what? I'd like to respond to that too, because I think, to some degree, people who are part of my ilk, if you will, have come along around my time. We have a little different take, than I think the generation that is preceding us, if you will. What I see, it is obviously not enough, where it seems to be as impactful or as effective that we would hope it would be. But there are lots of black folk, people who of color, who have amassed great wealth. I mean, great wealth. I mean, we're not talking just
talking wealth in Americans with great wealth, or folk of color around, because there's plenty of billionaires around the world who are of color, but you're talking about in the context of this country.
Yeah, I think even this country too.
All right.
Even this country too. And the reason why I think it's important to know, and they have very philanthropic, mindsets, and they contribute a lot, man. Because you really can't spend all of the money. So you have. They have their foundations, and they have specific causes. Those are shelters that they use to help them to hold on to, the wealth that they've amassed. But all of it actually sort of, and I don't think it's any fault of their own. I think they're being instructed and led this way to do a certain amount of charitable giving, and so you don't lose, if you will, to your wealth to people who will squander it.
I think what Darrell's talking is about a little bit. I think for what he's saying, I think, is in terms of what we were talking about the other day in the sense of community.
Right.
Not whether or not we've been able to acquire wealth, but whether or not we see each other and ourselves
Sure.
as valuable enough to take all of our wealth and spend it on.
Right.
And not
Right.
think of it as squandered.
Right.
Right.
Because our community and when we talk about community, we're talking about a sector of the community that has a need.
Right.
So, because there's no big monolith.
Right.
So, if we look around to what most people see when they see African Americans, they don't see tremendous wealth. They don't see
they don't.
No.
Rolls
Right.
Royces. They don't
Right.
see
Right.
CEOs. They
Right.
No.
see impoverished people, and
Right.
those
Right.
are the folks who are talking about Black Lives Matter. Because the folk with the kind of money that you're talking about, Russell, Secret Service can't get next to them because they
That's
don't
right.
roll that way. They roll just like Donald rolls,
Well,
Yeah.
with,
no,
with
but
forced security and
But my point
things
was,
like that.
my point was, and I agree with that perspective, but I was getting, it's long winded, and I know I shouldn't because this is talk radio and talk TV, but they have specific causes that they're giving to that folks don't necessarily see. It's usually sometimes within their own industry. Like I noticed Jamie Foxx, he stands behind every black up and coming, every person of color, even not so much person of color who has come into the industry. He gives what he can to help to lift those folks up.
So mentoring.
Yeah. His giving is actually becoming legendary. Where he now it's within his industry, and there are certain folks obviously that I'm sure he's got some kind of vetting process that he used to determine, and it's not going into the community at large
Oprah
per
gives.
se, but
Oprah gives
a ton.
there's-
She gives a ton.
Well, my point is really that one way we show value in our communities amongst melanated people is when we are willing to come to the table, right? Show care, show compassion, and show love for our financial assistance. When we're able to do business amongst each other,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
good business,
Right.
fair business.
Right.
Russell says, "Ye are your brother's keeper," right?
Absolutely.
And if we look at each other in that manner and say, hey, you know what? I know this man is valuable. I know this woman's valuable. We can't allow anyone to be left behind. We can't allow anyone financially to be left behind. I mean,
We shouldn't.
but I'm communicating.
I agree with that.
The boy, he talked about the talented 10. Talked about the talented 10 and the responsibility of what that talented 10 was supposed to be, but amongst the masses of melanated people in America. He talked a lot about that. And they were supposed to be able to, what you're talking about, be able to invest, reinvest, and hopefully raise people up, help people to help themselves
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there, man.
financially, to be financially sufficient, so that they,
Yeah.
they could have the good things of life, or just the basics of
I agree.
the basic,
I agree.
food to eat,
Absolutely.
kids be able to get their education, a roof over their head,
Right.
Yeah, see.
so that the people have the basic. So what I'm kind of really speaking to is when I value someone who's melanated, I'm able to do business with them. I see a Mr. McCauley, I see a Russell, and I see what they do professionally. I know the value of what they offer to the community. And I will pay Russell his value, his worth. I will pay Mr. McCauley his value, his worth. Mr. McCauley will sit me at the table, right? And we can sit down and strategize a business plan together of how we will earn together.
Right.
You see?
Amen.
See,
That's
so see, we can expect the world to respect us and respect millennial people when we may not love one another, respect one another, care for each other, be able to value one another. You know,
That's right.
So this is what I'm saying. I'm looking at how people handle relationships, and economy
and economics,
and showing that there's a direct relationship between that and the upliftment of a people.
Yeah, you know, Darrell, I'm just thinking as I listen to you speak, you know, I think about the publisher of, excuse me, of the late publisher of Ebony Magazine, and how in the 40s, John H. Johnson, for people who don't know him, who are not familiar, we have to educate people, came out of Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Right next door to Memphis.
There you go. And started a business. I think the first magazine was Negro Digest, because he saw a need that our people needed to know what we're doing and the issues of the day.
Right.
And then that graduated into Ebony Magazine. And of course, you know, the wide range of topics that he covered that were germane to our community. We saw ourselves in a different light. It was a magazine that every black family in America had on their coffee table. In fact, it was so much that Bill Cosby on the Cosby Show had it right there. He found a need and he filled it. And then he worked with other black business people. So he came together with the Earl Graves and the A.G. Gastons and Edward Lewis's with Essence and all of these. And so he was not afraid to do that. And the sadness for me is that the magazine is no longer in publication.
It is sad.
And unfortunately, that should not have happened. You know, black business people should have said, listen, this is an institution. We've got to save it. It didn't happen.
Well, I think that there is where Darrell's kind of pointing
And that's
to.
a problem. Even when
the
Lack of
desire among where is that set of people
yes,
among black folk
right.
that say we will not allow you to not publish.
Right.
What do you need?
Right.
And here, because there are other groups who do that.
Well, look at what happened right up the road here at the Crown Market.
Crown Market.
The Crown Market is a great example. You know, my mother says she remembers when they used to be on Albany Avenue down by Quirk, I think it was, years ago. The Jewish people said, listen, we can't afford to let this supermarket go. So what did they do? They pulled their resources together. They got those businessmen, Jewish businessmen got together and said, we're saving our supermarket. And when you drive out there, you see it. They've expanded, but they didn't let it die because it was that was valuable to them. They saw value in having kosher food.
Well, I think there were other markets that could serve the need.
Yeah, but that one is like it's a staple.
Right. Well, right. The point I'm trying to make is it's more than they have good food.
Of course.
It's that they value
right
and support
each other
with their dollars and see. I think, you know, from
14 times it goes around in their community.
Well, yeah. That's you know, I've heard that.
Yeah.
You know, Claude Anderson talks about that too, and I understand. You know, power economics too. But I understand. I believe almost to a fault, to some degree, why, you know, people support some blacks and don't support other blacks, you know, businesses. And, you know, they you know, have been, for whatever reason, instructed, like I was referring to earlier, by those folks who they look to for advice in getting involved in certain ventures on what the return on the investment potentially is, what the risk is, and how well they become more sophisticated in terms of how they decide to spend their dollars than they really need to be, in my opinion. But then to them it's their dollars, so they decide who they will share them with and why. Like I said, most of them stay in their lane, within their industry, if you will, when it comes to supporting other artists, because they know what the market will pay it. I mean, they know what the return on the investment is for investing in a good film, and and getting it to market through the distribution channels that they have, yada yada yada. So I'm saying, but what happens is that I believe in Darrell's case and in my case and in whomever else is looking for the support and really hoping that you see the value in what we're trying to produce, is that he doesn't lose his own confidence. Because what happens is the system is
The loss of identity, you mean?
well, yeah. Well, you work so hard at your craft, and you work so diligently at producing a product that everybody can appreciate, and that they can actually see the value in. That you ask yourself, why aren't they realizing that value in the same way that I'm hoping that they will? And the answer is, I believe, what you have in a capitalistic society right now is, number one, unfortunately, you have a lot of pirates. This country, you have people who, even though it may be your intellectual property, it may be your, idea, if you will, there are those who have money who are just waiting to pirate it. They're just waiting to take it, and they want to use it, for their own purposes, and not let you necessarily get credit for it. But then, again, it's important that you not lose heart and that you remain confident in yourself, because if you produce something that has value, then it won't lose any value, and you can produce something else.
Yeah, and you have to be around.
I still think that we're not. I still don't think we're on the same page. I think we're talking about two different things in a way, because one is solid investment based upon a good product,
right,
that can be taken to market,
right.
And I think that there's no problem in that area. I mean, that area is going to work for itself. I think the problem is that we can't get a supermarket in the north end of Hartford.
And we used to have one.
Well, there was a reason we used to have one.
Yes.
There used to be people who could afford to shop at it too.
Right.
So,
Yes.
I mean, there's a whole myriad of reasons why. But those things can be overcome if there is if we saw value in the people that were there. If we
Right.
saw value in one another. All right? If we have an enterprise zone. What is over there? What's the community zone over there with the five
Main
corners?
Street? Windsor Street?
Clay Arsenal?
Five corners up there.
Well, right,
Love Lane. There's a whole development
that's
there.
Clay Arsenal, isn't
Right.
it? Isn't
No, there's the Swift Factory
Swift Factory,
project
that's right, yeah.
is in
I'm sorry,
a
not Clay Arsenal.
zone.
That's
Right.
What is that zone called?
The Promise Zone.
The Promise Zone.
Yeah.
So if the state or federal government sets up promise zones, all right, the Promise Zone, you have policymakers who see value in establishing an area. They are incentivizing investment, either to help grow the quality of life for the people who live there, or plant the seeds for when those people leave, there's a new foundation for folk coming in. Someone, somewhere, sees there's value there.
Right.
Yet, we don't see value there just because we live there. We go back and forth. There are people who drive through the city who have means, who have the capacity to sit down with community leaders and have the capacity to reestablish neighborhoods and to give the social help that is necessary to get people to be on track. There's a whole myriad of reasons why the hood is the hood. People can't afford things. There's people who are self-medicated. There's people who have psychological issues. So I understand that the list goes on. All right, and there's a hood in every neighborhood. Okay, and hoods are all hues of people.
That's it.
They speak all languages.
That's right.
You know, so if you look at the hood where black folk live, you think, oh well, that's only them.
No.
And we take it where they're double wide, single wide, some folk got gap tooth and this, that, and the third. So there's a lot more of them than there are us.
Right.
They're just not living compacted.
Right.
All right. And so their issues are their issues.
Right.
For us, how do we see ourselves, and are we worth making the sacrifice for? I know your church has a development corporation, or you're involved in community development.
Yeah, they are.
All right.
They are.
You may not necessarily have a development corporation.
Right.
All right. So you purchase a buildings and a couple of other things. You're trying to redevelop the area where you are over by Enfield Street.
Well, they own the property that the church is, and then they own some property
back. So the grand scheme, the big picture is to help the community.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Oh,
right.
absolutely,
So
without a doubt.
And
all right,
Blue Hill
so-
Civic.
Without a doubt.
Blue Hill Civic.
Blue Civic,
But his reason I mentioned his church in particular is because one viewer here says, what responsibility do neighborhood churches have in making the community better? And what services beyond the typical holding of church service do churches provide the community for the benefit of the community? And those two stem from the base premise: the only constant black business in our neighborhoods are churches.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's why I was saying.
But there's power in the church. Though.
I'm not. What I'm saying. What I'm trying to articulate. I'm obviously not doing as good a job on morning talk as I thought. But what I'm trying to articulate to speak to Darrell's issue, you know, with us not supporting each other, and you know, and not being economically supportive of each other. Relationships and economics is what he said, you know, that stands out to me. And I'm saying where he doesn't see it, I do, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
And I'm saying I do see it, and I do see the transformation of the community actually taking place, and I see others supporting each other in certain circles. I see
I'm not saying that I don't see it.
Okay.
I'm not saying that I don't see it. I look at those two sectors as two indicators in our community.
Sure, absolutely.
Of whether we see or how we see each other's value.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I get that.
I think what Darrell is talking about, and I think even what the caller, the viewer, the viewer who made the comment about the churches, I think that's a point well taken. I mean, I think if you look at examples where that is happening, for example, the Abyssinia Baptist Church in Harlem, New York, is an example of what they have done with the Development Corporation. And they've got a great website providing tools, resources, and services to empower Harlem residents and families to realize their goals and dreams.
Now, see the pastor.
That's Floyd
Flake. See now that's I just introduced
his name. What is his name? Okay, I'll look it up.
He's the president of SUNY, the Southern
Butts, Calvin Butts.
Calvin Butts.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I just
Calvin
introduced him about 2 or 3 years ago at a convention that I was at. It's State Baptist Convention, because he's a preacher, obviously, and has deep roots, obviously, in the community. But Flake is
yeah.
like Butts. They have built, city blocks, if you will, where they have used, the capital, both private and public, dollars to do so. But the difference was, in my humble opinion, was the planning,
Yes.
if you will, and the tactics that they used, because they were able to attract corporate America. They were able to attract all kinds of, IT and that kind of stuff to come into those areas and support the community, because they have a market. They actually, can speak to, the fact that you will satisfy, 500,000 people, a day coming to, into this commerce.
Different paradigm than we have here in Hartford.
Yeah, very much so.
But it was plain. That's why I said I understand people's reticence when it comes to the black church. I truly do, because and I understand it to a fault, I believe, because if you're continuing to come to something and you remain in impoverished conditions, something's wrong. This whole idea of supporting something and you remain in the same state and condition that you've been in for the last 15, 20 years or more, something is wrong. I agree. That is absolutely true.
I got a question.
It should not be that way.
Is it that the church themselves, the ministers themselves, are not sure? Are they afraid to step out? Do they not have vision? What is this? From where I'm sitting.
Yeah. They lot of them simply just don't have the business acumen.
Okay. But are there people in the flock that do?
Well, in some cases there are. In some cases they're not.
Well, I think we have a lot of talent in our church. We need to start utilizing it a lot more.
Yeah, often they don't have a financial economic plan to uplift the parishioners, that the parishioners can be involved in.
Well, I think we mentioned, not to be critical of anyone, but I think that was the point of our guest initially when he spoke about helping people with their credit. And I asked the question. I said, well, what are you doing in terms of financial planning for your parishioners?
See,
and he said, oh, well, I haven't done that. And I think that's where, and that's not to criticize him, but that may be the problem in a lot of the churches where they just people are really money management
to me people
wealth creation,
people are deliberately being confused. I think it's part of the deception, because they don't want us to actually come together collectively and do things. They're even in the north end of Hartford, there are hundreds of churches, different denominations. Mm-hmm. Why aren't those denominations working for a better community? And I'm saying to you,
well, the social service agencies have started to do that, but it's not the churches. I know where you're going with this. The churches have not. I mean, even when we had a black bank, Connecticut Savings and Loan, most of the churches, the black churches, were banking in non-black institutions. The power comes from putting your resources into the black.
But they wouldn't do it. Once again, there's a whole myriad of reasons as to why these things happen and go on, and so
don't happen,
and don't happen, and so it's almost a what had happened was because it should be a lot. It should be, but there are.
And then there may have been things that the bank might not have necessarily have done to reach out. You don't know. There are a whole lot of reasons, but I'm saying if you got something like that, then we have to support it. And
well, first and foremost, it presupposes that that's the role of the church.
Exactly.
How come the West Indian
Exactly.
Social Club isn't doing something?
Right.
Or the
Well, they've separated themselves.
or the Knights or the the VFW Lodge. Organizations are not charged with uplift of the whole
Exactly.
community.
That's right.
And
No.
for people presuppose
Right.
that because money flows into the church,
Right. That's
that the
right.
church is somehow now
That's-
charged
That's
with.
right.
But don't you feel that the church has always been one of the most powerful institutions that we have in our
The
community?
church is
In
a
any
powerful
community.
institution.
In
But
any
in our
community.
own particular community,
In
it
any
has always
community.
been powerful.
It's in any community.
I would contend that there are
And the church is doing great things.
Yes, I know.
The church
Right,
is
right.
definitely, doing things sociologically, spiritually, to help uplift. Like I was saying, it may not be the agenda or the charge of the church to allow the parishioners
It's not an
to be
organization,
uplifted
first of all.
economically.
Right.
right.
To uplift the economic. That may not be the charge, but there are some churches that is their charge. That is part of their charge.
Mm.
And then certain churches don't have autonomy. They're not religious corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very
know,
true. Some don't have the
Okay.
kind of autonomy one might think.
Okay.
And you have to be careful as a church because churches, are nonprofit organizations, if you will, and they could be challenged on their nonprofit status by involving themselves in profit making ventures, if you will.
So how does that Abyssinia? They created their own
they have
separate.
a development corporation. I'm
Right.
sure.
Right. That's the difference.
Well, but then it's how it's structured.
Yes.
They may not necessarily own the development corporation. They just may be a majority stakeholder, if you will, where their voice on a board actually determines, how, dollars are spent and what kind of activity takes place. Those people have more resources available to them. Floyd Flake is on the board of trustees at Trinity College. He has actually
So there's
has
political connections.
well, he
and
was
all
a
of that.
former congressman
Yes,
too,
yes.
so he has a whole bunch of resources that he could make available to it. Calvin Butts was the president of the college and university system in
SUNY,
New York.
yeah, mhm.
So I'm just saying, those folks have resources available to them, that other folks may or may not have, and so he's taking full advantage.
There are a lot of things that communities give birth to certain things.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen in Hartford. You watch.
Yes.
If the community calls for or makes demands, change happens. And, no white knight, no black knight, no dark knight coming in here on a white horse or
That's right.
a four-wheel vehicle gonna save Hartford. People have to have value for themselves, and
Right.
those kinds of
The,
changes
the,
come.
beau- the beauty of what we've been talking about is that there is a movement afoot that is specifically geared towards what you're talking about. I'm surprised you haven't heard.
That's
more.
the third just way.
That is the third just way.
Well,
Even more than that, you have folks, especially when it comes to the north end of Hartford. Howard K. Hill and some of those guys have been working on doing development. They just haven't figured out how to finance it. And I'm telling you, the just third way is how we
we're
do
running
it.
out of time, music.
Oh, I got it. I got that hook.
Darrell,
You got that hook.
our time has
you
come
pulled the
to it.
preacher
That's been 1
coattail.
hour goes by so fast.
It sure does.
Will you join us again?
Can you hear
Darrell,
me?
can
The
you hear
show's
me?
over.
Huh?
The show's over.
The show's not over, but the first hour is over. And so
Okay, yeah, certainly. I'm here.
we will, can we have you come back and join us next week sometime?
Indeed.
Okay, he said indeed.
Indeed?
Indeed.
Okay, and
Absolutely.
in the meantime, we're trying to figure out why your sound is the way it is too.
There's a skip there.
Yeah, something's Probably with the Zoom side, because the sound wasn't like that before we got on the air.
Try that maybe.
But we will work on that, sir. Thank you so much for coming on board, Darrell Fitzgerald. He is an author, a writer, and he does television, radio, and he's a poet. We'll have to have him do some poetry. Thanks a lot for joining us, sir.
Thanks, Darrell.
Thank you for allowing me to be a guest.
All
Be
right.
blessed.
God bless
Take
you.
care.
All right, my friends, it is Morning
Take
Talk, and we got Russell. Sorry, Russell, I didn't mean it.
You got me.
That's all right. He's hydrating. The hydration station.
Hydration. The hydration station. I have coffee, which I think is actually dehydrates,
Yes, I have green
but
tea.
I have water.
Green tea?
Water. This is 1.0 basic drink for humans.
Absolutely.
Water.
Water.
It has everything a body needs.
And everybody should be
And then
drinking
some.
lots of water, especially this week with hot weather coming in. Continue to drink your water.
Continue to
Great for
drink
the skin, great for the body.
Absolutely.
That's right.
All right.
Mind.
Absolutely.
Stick and Stay will be back right after this. Don't go anywhere. It's Morning Talk with J. Stan McCauley, Vicky, Fennell, and Russell Williams. Is it the pedophile school administrator or taxation without representation? Is it the gatekeeping community leaders who sell out the very people they are fighting for? Or is evil the politician that puts out lies and takes in cash? However you may classify evil, having to choose the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. No wonder so many people don't vote. It's time for constituents to flip the script and leave the plantation of party politics and free your political mind.
Hello, my name is Destiny King. I am a member of the Hartford Communities That Care Youth Leadership Academy in the Young, Educated, and Determined to Succeed program. Over the past 27 weeks, I have been examining the intersections between education, poverty, violence, and trauma to develop policy and program recommendations. I served on a poverty work group, and the following is our recommendations. Organize resources to support entrepreneurs, expand efforts to provide highly qualified mentors for teens, to place priority on investments in affordable, high-quality childcare and early education, focus on giving people the tools to start new enterprises that will improve their circumstances and spur economic growth, as well as removing barriers to small business growth. Repair and strengthen the safety net to make sure there are safeguards in place that apply equally to all people. Reduce the large gaps between the very rich and the rest of society and make it easier for people to get into the middle class. Also, to address the gaps that persist for African Americans in educational attainment, employment, wages and income, family wealth and home ownership, health and infant mortality, and incarceration. Thank you for your time, and I hope you can support our recommendations.
Well, my experience for being in with Kinsella, I had a good experience. We've been with them since June, and our group leader is Cheryl Perry. And well, actually, all the parents, we get along, and the reason why I joined was because my child was being bullied. But now I'm getting like the right help for my child, and the rest of my children, they're doing fine in school. And I would like to continue to be in this program because it helps us as parents, especially when we don't know what to do as far as helping our children.
I don't know. Oh, there we go. All right. House volume is down so low. I can't hear myself. So if I can't hear myself, I don't know that I'm on the air. All right, we're back. There we go. All right. We're having a spirited off-air conversation. And
It's an interesting conversation.
It's an interesting
How does
conversation.
the success of a few benefit the entire group?
The multitude.
Yes,
How
yes.
does the success of the few benefit
Yes.
the multitude?
Well, people say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So, I think part of what has to happen is for others have to, determine or be determined, if you will, to be a part of the overall success of any event, if you will. And I think the awareness is there. Like we keep, in my humble opinion, redefining the problems. we keep redefining them, and at the end of the day, the problems are, to me clearly defined.
So what is the problem, succinctly?
Very succinctly, it's poverty.
Oh,
at
I
one
think it
level.
goes. I think it goes even deeper than that. It's education.
It is education.
Education is at the root of this.
So we have education, we have poverty.
They're connected.
Poverty and education, without a doubt.
Connected.
Connected, let's put those right on the top of the
Right.
shelf. Now, we know what those problems are. It's like, all right, we got 3 feet of water in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Foundation problem.
Right.
So,
Add a third one, and then obviously the economic piece.
all right, so
But that's
poverty,
poverty and
poverty,
economic
poverty.
are the same.
to me,
Yes.
They're the same.
education is something that can be dealt with.
Right.
All right. Poverty is a challenge,
Yes.
but in a city
As small as Hartford.
the size of Hartford,
Right.
poverty should not be a problem. Poverty is purposeful, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, we don't have 120,000 people living in poverty.
Of course not.
Hartford is the 4th poorest city of its size in the United States,
Right.
and poverty is a revenue generator,
Mm-hmm,
just like crime. So there are federal dollars, state dollars that come in, and private dollars that come in to help mitigate poverty, and in my term, I say people are the new cotton. So instead of growing cotton, you have people. You
That's
manage them.
That's right.
So managing the people is profitable, like running a prison.
That's right.
All right. So there's money in prisons.
Public buildings. That's what they call them.
All right.
Investment,
So
yes.
so we can deal with those things. So we have a problem with education. We have a problem with poverty. What's the fix? Because defining stuff over and
Yeah.
over again is not a fix.
Absolutely
No, of
right.
course not, no.
Absolutely
A
true.
system upgrade, as we
Absolutely.
always say.
Absolutely.
Well, even
Absolutely.
if needing a system upgrade, I'm good with that. So
Right,
what are
right.
we going to upgrade it with?
Right.
And how do we make it work?
Right.
You can have the best engine on the planet on Blueprint. It's made
not
out of
implemented.
unattainium. You can't get that one piece of mystery
Well-
metal, but when we find it, so I mean,
Well,
how are we
it-
going to help these people that need help?
Well, it goes back to, I think, something we try to say on a regular basis here at Access TV. People need to be more informed.
Right.
People need to be, their own, if you will, student, professor, and they need to be their own researchers, so that they can make better choices, so that the learning that they get, is coming from a reliable source, if you will. And so part of what I believe Morning Talk does is we try to give information that we know that can be used. There's a practical application. There's a feasible, doability, to some of the things that we say. So when it comes to education, you just have to have a reliable source, and you have to actually put in play, some of the things that are being suggested. For example, most people don't understand the functions of government. Unfortunately, they understand that there's a need to vote, and that people in government who you elect supposed to represent you and your interests, and they're supposed to take all of that in everybody's interest to a place where, if the issues are being addressed and are being addressed in a way that's constructive.
Well, I think I think the next piece of that is advocacy. And most people don't understand how to advocate.
Mm-hmm.
About a year ago, I went over to Inner Community, a friend of mine who is a client there, invited me in to speak to some of the people there who were dealing with various forms of mental health issues. And one of the things that they did is they exposed them to the legislative process. They took them to the legislative office building and that sort of thing to understand that whole process and segment of the government.
Mm-hmm.
So I came in and I said, listen, they said, we'll talk about advocacy. And I said, well, okay, this is how my journey began. And I talked about certain things. And I said, it really starts again with educating yourself about what the problem is, what the issue is, and then being able to articulate that to the decision makers. And sometimes the decision makers, they may know about it, but they might not know it in the great detail that the person that's being adversely affected by it knows it. So in order for action and change to take place, you have to be the advocate. Mm-hmm. You have to have the education about whatever the issue is, and then you have to be willing to be the advocate. Mm-hmm. It's not, and sometimes you have to work with people you don't like. And I told them that too. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's a common goal. What is it that we are trying to achieve?
Let me suggest something. Listening to what you guys were saying, because when you said education, I was thinking something totally different than what Russell addressed. Mm-hmm. And communication is key in a conversation. And so when I was thinking when you said education and poverty, I'm thinking of in society. So I'm not thinking of us being a source of education or people being educated.
But we are, whether we realize it or not.
I
Morning talk
I understand that morning talk, but morning talk is educating.
I was thinking of the larger.
I was thinking in the larger context of schools
That's
and
what
community.
I was saying too. That's what I was
being challenged.
Yes.
But all of that led to me thinking this, because there is one great narrative. Everything else is just a distraction. The good book says,
amen.
And here we believe that it's justifiable. There's the Bible and other texts are as valuable a source of information as the Constitution and any other work that you might have. So, in that particular work, it says the people perish for what?
Their lack of knowledge.
Lack of vision. For lack of vision.
They're destroyed because of lack of vision.
They're destroyed because of lack of vision. And that supports my thesis that people are sheep. And I don't care how much you try. The crowd that follows is not going to go out and get an education and be self-motivated and self-actualized, understand deep finance, this, that, and the third. They're going to follow the leader. Which is why leaders are assassinated if they look like they might disrupt the status quo.
That's right, very much so.
And I still maintain that we have a leadership vacuum at every level.
Of course.
And so, it is not surprising to me that people who don't know the first thing about government are allowed to lead folk
off a cliff
in those positions because they don't know where they're going.
That's
so
right. It's like
the
going on a trip.
followers will follow a good leader just as easily as a bad leader because they put their faith and trust in the person who is leading. Look at these movements around the world. These folk didn't go out last night and read up on civil unrest. They didn't read up on social justice. They didn't read up on power dynamics. They didn't read up on white supremacy. They didn't read up on police violence and oppression. They're following a lead. And they'll show up with 100,000. They'll show up with 20. They'll show up with 50. They're going to show up and they're going to follow the leader. And we don't have quality leaders, and the ones that we have aren't willing to step up to the plate.
That's right.
I reject that too. I really do. I think
I don't see it. Where is it? That's what I want to know.
Well,
where are even the failures?
Well, there's a standard. There's a standard that's set, and there are standard barriers. There are some who meet the standards, some who exceed the standards, and some who don't meet the standards.
Where are the leaders?
I think. Well, again, I think it actually speaks to the task that's at hand. There are some folk who I believe have demonstrated, good leadership, may not have gotten the results that we have hoped that they would get, but have gotten some tangible results. And I'm saying that, unfortunately, the time it takes to steer the ship from one direction to another, or the herd, if you will, the flock, those sheep from one direction to another is often, taken off track simply because one or two in the herd decided to go in a different direction than the majority of the herd, But you don't want to leave any sheep behind. You want everybody to come and to be a part of the
majority
of
the sheep don't go astray.
Well, yeah.
One or two do. Not
Yeah.
the whole.
Well,
one that's a maverick, right?
But you can't. How important is the one or two that have gone astray? That becomes the question for leadership. How important the one or two that have gone astray. So I'm just saying.
So there are going to be some casualties along the way.
It seems inevitable.
Are there disposable among us?
It seems inevitable. It seems inevitable. I hear, kind of, the dogma that, we need to, understand that is just a part of the paradigm. I understand that. But what I'm saying to you is that when you say leadership, I'm saying there are those who I believe had or have, and if they just didn't realize, but had they had what they needed in terms of support, and I'm not talking about just, people who were willing to follow, but also resources, money. Had they had, the infrastructure in place that some have.
I don't know, Brother
well,
Russell.
Listen, you run campaigns, so I'm just saying, if you had the machine that you could pay, that other people had when they were running campaigns, I think we look at a different outcome.
To a degree, yes, and to a degree,
right.
Well,
no,
you can always reason something away. You can reason something away.
This is not a reason. This is a matter of fact.
Okay.
There is a political machine. Those of us who challenge the machine, like us, myself, we're not delusional.
Right.
The machine requires us. It really does. Because this is the what I call the Steve Fournier effect. Steve, who was a lawyer here in Hartford, was on the Board of Education, served on Corporation Counsel for Hartford for some time, this, that, and third. He is an activist. He's an activist looking for a cause. He's up in age now.
Didn't he pass away?
No.
No? Okay, he's still around. Okay.
I saw him the other day.
Oh my God, he's still around.
So Steve is now the precedent legally for why people can't get close to the president. When President Obama was president, he went up to Weaver and he had a sign, him and other people. And he filed a suit against the city of Hartford and Darrell Roberts because the police were holding him back from being able to be close enough to the president to see his sign.
Right.
So how can we redress government if we're holding a sign they can't read? So he sued the city on that basis. The judge rendered that the security of the president supersedes his right to redress the government and free speech. So now he had been counterproductive to the very thing he was trying to accomplish. And he threw his hands up in the air for a while because he was so upset. Okay.
Well, I mean, that also, I mean, they even don't, even without a sign, if you challenge a political figure at an event, they want to escort you out. So you can even try to redress government. They want to escort you out.
Well, that's true, but
Yeah.
my point is that there's a machine,
Yeah.
all right? And people have to have hope and believe that their voice matters,
Right.
that their vote matters, and that if they go out and vote, if they go to the poll, they can make a difference.
Right.
If they stop believing that, the system collapses.
Democracy dies.
Right.
Democracy dies. So like John Kennelly said in the article that appeared on the front page of the Current in October, the Don Quixote type folks serve an important function in democracy because they continue to challenge the system.
Absolutely.
All right. Don Quixote is never going to win the fight against the windmill. He's not going to win. I don't care how many times he goes out. I don't care how many times he processes it that the windmill is a dragon, or you can make it whatever fall you want. When you stand in front of that windmill, it's gonna knock you off your feet. You could get stuck your sword and it's gonna kill you. You're not gonna beat it with a sword.
Right.
If I become part of the system, then I can be included in the process. But the machine is the one that elevates people to the positions of leadership that
Well, we
become
see that.
feckless and incapable of
Yes.
moving anything forward for the people who they supposedly represent. That's why 60 years later, we're still fighting for the same thing we supposedly achieved, because the machine is designed to produce what it's producing. All you got to do is look and you can see
Yeah, you
what
can
it's
see-
producing.
Yeah, we've seen what it's producing.
You can look and see what it's producing. So,
It ain't pretty.
in order to, there is only one way to beat the machine, and that's to rob it of its fuel. And its fuel is the people. If you
can't
can
run on a dry
if
engine.
you can rally the people, you can beat the machine. And people need leaders. And I don't see the people being gathered together by leaders. So we need dynamic leaders. My failure to amass a large following of people is that I am not dynamic enough to push beyond their sedentary ways or their embracing of the machine that's there, or, and I put this out to people who just don't want to accept it, and then I'm done, or the people are happy. I mean, just because I don't think that this is a great way to live, or you could do better, doesn't mean that they're not happy. You know, when people are upset, they move.
Well, you see what's happening.
Right. So
Yeah.
just because I can't make the move doesn't mean that they're not satisfied with what they have.
Let me offer this disclaimer. This is Stan's show, so that is Stan's perspective.
That's my perspective. Right.
And he's fully entitled to and fully persuaded.
Part of my job is to create the I can get away with it.
Because I really do.
Vehemently.
Well, I reject out of hand. Out of hand, what he just said, especially
Totally.
about himself. Because see, I don't see what he sees.
No, I don't either.
I honestly
No,
don't see it.
I think Stan
I think
very
he-
dynamic. That's why he was.
Well, not just that, and this is not patronizing. This is not me trying to patronize. I try as best as I can to be completely objective, and and even more so, I look at things through a different prism too. My thing is looked at through the prism of Scripture, and I know who he belongs to, and I know who his father is, because we we're brothers. And so I'm saying, you know, my reality is that the quality of leadership that you have now, to some degree, leaves a lot to be desired. I'll say that. But I also will say, too, that I believe that, you know, the best leaders are followers. And I think that if they have followed a certain path, they can expect a certain outcome. Now, where they can change, I mean, where you can see visible and tangible change in the landscape, you know, to me, I think you have to choose, if you will, what the narrative will be. Because if I had to guess, and you know, and we say on a personal level, I see more, and I think this is what I think a lot of Caucasian and white people see too. More blacks, you know, having more and being able to do more than they've ever had or been allowed to do in this country. And not only that, they're threatened by it because they cannot stop it. They cannot stop it. The momentum and the pendulum of justice, it swings, you know, in a direction that you know you cannot stop it.
So things are not as bad as some would have us think.
The atrocities have rung true throughout centuries, throughout time. I mean, the oppressor still exists. The system is exactly what you say it is. I'm not, you know, I'm not disputing that at all. I do know, though, that the system has been beaten, and it is being beaten every single day. See, I think that, you know, quite frankly, and it's because of my intricate involvement in it, that the church is not a building and it's not an organization.
Right.
The church is me and it's you.
So an organism.
so what I see are not just progressive steps. I see monumental change actually taking place. I can see it. I'm you know, and you know, I'm just not completely unveiled it yet, but we're headed to a place where they won't even believe what they see, because that's just how dynamic it'll be, you know, in the current future. I'm saying now, because it's all been here all along. We just, again, you said tools, like government's a tool, we just haven't understood how to use the tools. And I'm telling you, I know how to use them. I know others who know how to use them. And I'm telling you, they're being used, and you will see the change right before your eyes.
Okay.
I guess that's the bottom. That's a great place for the bottom of the hour. The bottom of the hour break.
Reminds me of something my father always says. He says, if enough people start chopping the tree down, the tree comes down.
Oh, I like that.
It's gonna happen.
He's 92. He's got a lot of golden nuggets.
That's nice. You know what? I'm gonna get me a little axe. I'm gonna get a little axe. I'm gonna find a little axe.
I think I got one at the house. I don't know.
No, like a little pin.
Oh, a little pin?
Yeah, like an axe.
Oh, yeah.
Where that axe. I love that.
Yeah,
Folk are asking, what's the axe for? It's time to start chopping the tree.
Yeah.
Right?
Thanks, Dad.
So when are we gonna start working on that tree?
We gotta find an axe.
Right.
Yeah.
We gotta find an axe. All right. Well, my friends, it's Morning Talk, where you're gonna get all kinds of perspectives. The perspective we need most, of course, is yours. You can jump into the chat section and leave some comments like Dr. Bowen or Mike Windish. We have opportunities for you to speak your mind. Please use them. Stick and stay, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.
My name is Eddie Brown, Program Director at Hartford Communities That Care. I've been in the field of youth development and mentoring for the past 5 years, serving children, youth, young adults, and families. It has been an amazing experience since I have been on board with HCTC to help make a difference in the lives of our youth. Throughout my experiences, I've learned the importance of a good mentor, which is simply being the adult that has time for a child, who cares about that child, and who believes in that child. Here's a few points. Allowing the youth to understand their full potential, respects cultural differences, providing the prolonged relationship which helps the youth as they go through life, listens well, is stable, is a positive role model, nurtures a positive relationship that respects the mentee, reinforces mentee's success, shares decision-making with mentee, and last but not least, passion, wanting to make a difference. Practicing and applying these skills have been very vital in all the work I do to help assist and coordinate in the programs and services we offer at HCTC. I thank you for your time, and for all the mentors and role models out there, let's continue to be the change.
I just wonder sometimes, where people get their information from, and the sources that they use for information.
The grapevine.
And it really is very telling. I had a friend who I would consider a dear friend say to me something to me the other day. It sort of threw me for a loop. I was kind of, I wasn't really shocked, if you will, but I was kind of taken back. They made a characterization, with respect to me, that I, said to myself, I said, I'm not sure of how you were able to arrive at that kind of description. I mean, what happens, and you I'm sure you heard it too, Stan, when you decide to accept, the voice of the Lord, and you hear his call, folks say, well, I remember when.
I remember that guy used to be down at the club,
he used to hang
and he
out the
wore
club.
sneakers, and he was cooking out in the backyard, and he didn't come up in the world now. He don't know us no more.
Yeah, exactly.
See, all my remember when folk are back in Pennsylvania, so it's odd. It's odd for me. It's odd because for most people in Hartford,
Goodwill and
I've
buy
always
clothes.
been Pastor Stan.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've been here long enough now to folks have arrived at certain conclusions about you that probably
right. So I know. Believe me, I know what you're saying because during the campaign, people, I think you might make a good man, but you're so religious, and I don't know about being
Well, and you know what I answered to that? You know how I answered to that? I said some of the greatest leaders in the world have been ministers that have led change. Has anyone heard of Dr. Martin Luther King? And when I said that, their eyes were like, oh. I said, here's a man who was a preacher. out of Atlanta who moved presidents
That's a
into
good one,
action.
Queen V. That's a good one.
So don't
That's
tell
a
me
good one.
that a minister can't do it.
That's a good one, Queen V.
Yeah, but people do have they
got
do
quiet.
make assumptions, and they roll with their assumptions.
Well, there's a lot of assumptions.
well,
People always say that. I think a lot of it is they feel threatened. I've been told through some other sources that, if you get Vicky involved in something, she's going to take over. And I told this person, and the person who said this to me said that, well, indirectly, I confronted the person who happens to be prominent in the neighborhood, and I said, well, you know what? If you were doing what you were supposed to be doing, I wouldn't have to step up, now would I? Also,
Queen
if
V.
you were moving in a progressive direction, I would be happy to work with you.
See, that's a
And I wouldn't be commenting about you wanting to be in charge or having to take over. We could be able to collaborate, but you can't do that because you see me as a threat instead of seeing us as an opportunity.
Wow.
And I backed off, and I've backed off ever since.
That's you got the direct approach. You see, I think it, sometimes I wish I had it. Because
Russell, you have a way that is very philosophical, and it's great, and that works for you.
Well, I don't know about
yes, it does. It does, and it's I love it. I mean, I love it.
Sometimes it works.
It makes me stop and think.
Right.
It gives me pause, and I mean that complimentary. Stan makes me think in a different way. Oz makes me think. A lot of the relationships that I have with different people make me think differently,
Right.
and so But what I'm saying is that those are all strengths that we all bring to the table. I think that's the beauty of this.
I wanted to say this yesterday.
Oh.
I learned this in corporate America. We would often have these little sessions where it was team building, and they had this thing called SWOT. Did you have it?
SWOT.
SWOT.
Is that strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats?
That's exactly what
Yeah,
it is. Strength, and there was a grid that was built.
Yes.
And on that grid, you would say where your strengths were, where your weaknesses are, where the opportunities lie, and where the threats are. And then I guess it was just to make you aware.
Mm-hmm.
It was creating a certain awareness. Yeah. It was insurance companies. They I think sometimes they got almost too much time on their hands.
Some great thinker upstairs comes up with these
It was a
things.
psychologist. It was a sociologist or a psychologist or both. It was because I believe that at that time, and we're talking early 70s, late 70s, because that's when I got here. I was on the heels of the things that had happened in the 60s, and they were trying to. What they were trying to do was build emerging markets, they call it, and the emerging markets meant something to, depending upon which circle you were in. But insurance companies, they were trying to actually bring more people of color into the insurance industry.
I remember that.
Yeah, they were trying to bring, and so it's how people, sort of embrace the information. How they choose to, to filter it, or how they choose. I've always been a big proponent of. No one else can tell me about Stan. Mm-hmm. You may know him, but you know him based upon the relationship that you have.
Yeah.
But you don't know the Stan that I know, because the relationship that I have with Stan is completely different than the one that you have. And so I'm using my information from my perspective as an enhancement to the relationship that we have. I don't see it as being critical. I see it as being being able to better communicate, better to to work with, better to
compliment.
Yeah.
Yes.
I literally have friends.
Oh, you do have some?
I don't know if they're. I actually do have friends.
Yes.
But I didn't mean that in that sense. That's that
He was
word
just being
literally that
facetious.
I'm picking up from my kids. I keep telling them, stop
was the dramatic
saying
part.
literally for everything. No, I have people that I know I would consider friendly. They're my friends. But I have friends who, if I am sitting down with someone and someone else comes down to sit down, other person to get up and leave. I mean, literally.
I think I've seen that, Stan.
Visceral reaction.
And want to say, I cannot believe you actually take the time to talk to that person. And and I'm like, well, you my friend,
right?
You know,
you.
Right. So I always had the mindset, never let your friends pick your friends.
Amen.
Right.
Because the relationship you have with individuals is based on an individual thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now the two of them may not get along, and I call that grown folk business. That's grown folk.
Right.
I don't care why you don't get along with
That's
them.
right.
I don't even want to hear the story because that's you two.
Right.
I'm not in that.
Right.
I'm not taking nobody's
Right.
side.
Right.
I don't
Right.
know nothing
Right.
about
Right.
nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
But
A
my
lot-
favorite thing to what you were talking about,
Which one?
about
The
working
acts?
collaboratively,
Oh, the collaborative. Yeah.
is I like to help other people bring their vision to pass. So when I go to meetings and folk go around this, that, and the third, I say, look, I can, I'm here to help move 10,000 gallons of water. Now, we could do it a spoon at a time. Or we can go rent us a
That's
nice
the kin- that's the kindred spirit we share.
$10,000 10,000 gallon tanker. Put it all in there at once and get the job done. But I'm not here to tell you how I think it should be done. I'm here to do whatever lifting is necessary for as long as I can. And that'd be my contribution.
But it's interesting you should say that. Because certainly that is your outlook, and that is it is yours because that's what you say it is. It belongs to you. That's your.
He's defined it.
You've defined it. But others, unfortunately, will take that same willingness for you to help others and twist the narrative and suggest, oh, he's just doing it because, he expects something in return. That's what happens. Mm-hmm. That's what I was talking about when it came to Darrell in our first hour, when he was talking about relationships and he was talking about economics. Because people have mistook the relationship, and in most cases they think that the relationship is not necessarily what you say it is, simply because someone else has suggested. There's the suggestion, because that's what the devil he gives he throws those suggestions. Suggested that that's not really authentic, and that's not what you're truly trying to do.
So what you perceive to be a thing, apart from any data as to what actually it is, it's just your perception, and it can actually be wrong.
Thoughts are things, man.
So like,
Mind can play some tricks on you if you allow it.
Well, but see, like Russell said, where do people get their information?
Exactly.
Again, where do they get their information?
Right. And the damaging thing about how people perceive things is when you let their false perception become the reality in your mind.
Right.
And you start governing your walk, talk, and thoughts based upon what you think they think.
Yeah.
Instead of just being true to yourself.
Yeah. I agree.
And this is the confidence that you have, which is where we started off at the beginning of the program, where Russell was saying, oftentimes for us who are confident people,
that's right.
Yes.
Folk assail your confidence and say, oh, they're arrogant.
oh, who does she think
they-
she
Yeah.
is?
They're so arrogant.
yeah,
Obviously something you're not.
Yeah.
Ooh, goodness,
Well, see, Miss
jeez.
Queen V.
Obviously
you,
something you're
Queen
doing.
V. You. Oh my goodness.
And you know what? And
Queen
you-
V is all right with me.
But
There you go. Wow.
She goes to
I like
direct.
that.
Well, but I
She
tell
She does the direct.
and
approach.
sometimes with women you will see this. Now the sexual dynamics, the women will behave like that towards each other, unfortunately. And I've learned this a lot by being in sales, that a lot of it, when you're representing a product, other women will look at you and say, well, gosh, you're so confident. I can't be like you. I said, look at this. I said, this is the problem right here. You have viewed yourself in a way that it makes yourself feel inferior. You can't make yourself feel inferior. Nobody can. What is it? Nobody can make you feel inferior unless you let them.
Amen.
That's right.
Okay, and so if putting myself together gives me confidence, I put myself together too, and I work on it intellectually. Those are the things that you have to work on. So I say to women, I said, look, if you get intimidated by another woman, that's an opportunity for you to work on yourself. Find out what she's doing to make herself look good. Find out what she's reading. Find out what she's doing for personal development. What is it that makes her look as great and intimidates you? See, I'm not intimidated by anybody. So
Amen.
that doesn't mean anything. I just say, hi, nice to meet you. And I know what I'm bringing to the party.
Right.
And I want to find out what he or
Hello.
she's bringing to the party. And there's an
Hello.
opportunity there.
Well, that's what's necessary, folks. Have confidence in who you are. Walk by faith and not by sight. Church on there. It is what it is, right? All right. Well, that's Morning Talk for
Again?
Wednesday.
Oh, my Lord.
That's Morning Talk for Wednesday. And so we'll be back here tomorrow to do it all once again. It's Morning Talk with Jason McCauley, Vicky Fennell, and Russell Williams. We'll see you tomorrow. Get up bright and early, 8 o'clock. Tune in and share it with a friend. See you tomorrow.